Hey everybody, welcome to our latest SABIAN Education Network webinar. I see everyone jumping into our room here. Um, it's a lovely day here in New Jersey where I and my guest are both sitting right now. Um, I'd like to give everybody a minute to come in. So thanks so much for being here. Just while everybody files into the virtual room, a couple of little housekeeping things. As you know, you can type in your questions as Rob and I go through the presentation. There is a SEN event in Philadelphia this Friday. It's a live event with a terrific panel. It's Dom Famularo is coming down. Sherry Maracle is our host. Mark Dicciani from University of the Arts in Philly, and Dan Andre, a great teacher from the Philadelphia area. We'll all be there together from 2 to 4, and then we're actually doing a master class at night from 7 to 9, and the master class is open to the public, so tell your students and friends in Philly to come by. You can watch Dom beat up on me and Sherry. We have nothing planned. Just do that to us. And then next week we have the great Jim Toscano doing a webinar on Sibelius drum notation, because that's been requested a lot. That's going to be next week, I believe, on the 24th. So, all right. So today, I'm really thrilled, happy, and excited to have somebody who's not only been a mentor to me, my boss, a huge factor in my life and career in the music business, but a guy who, because we've become friends and we worked together for so long, that I forget what a titan he is in this industry. A guy who I've heard his name since I first started playing drums, Mr. Rob Wallis from Hudson Music. Welcome, Rob.
Hey Joe B from New Jersey.
So, so obviously, most of you here, I'm sure you know, as I did, Rob's name from DCI Music Video, where he essentially put the idea of watching drum lessons on video on the map back in the early days with Up Close with Steve Gadd, and then continuing on, I saw videos with Simon Phillips, Dennis Chambers, Greg Bissonette, the Buddy Rich Scholarship Concerts with Neil Peart, and all these amazing drummers. And also, I knew Rob from his co-ownership with Paul Siegel of Drummers Collective in New York City. And then over time, Rob eventually sold DCI Music Video and began making drum videos for Warner Brothers and was a consultant with Warner Brothers. And then went on to form Hudson Music, which is, as everyone knows, the greatest video education drum company in the world. And in recent years, Rob, I can't forget, he's a very active player. He's still playing all over New Jersey, actually playing more now than he's been for years, and playing with we play with a lot of the same people around New York, which is really fun. And so he's a great drummer, has a lot of professional playing experience. And on the cutting edge side, has developed the app Drum Guru, which is one of the best educational apps where you can download individual packs of lessons from some famous drummers, actually, who have done very little other educational content, like Mike Portnoy, Chad Smith, Steve Gadd. And we've also been partnered in deploying some digital curriculum for universities. And so it's been my privilege and pleasure, Rob, to work with you on all this stuff. And welcome to the SABIAN Education Network.
Yeah, likewise, Joe. Thank you, and thanks for having me here. It's been a lot of great experiences and memories. Really thinking back, preparing, mentally to sit and talk to you like this. We sort of converse on a different level, almost daily. But to do this, I wanted to kind of change gears and give it some thought. And yeah, it's been a great ride. It's been such a pleasure working with you, and the quality of your work and your work ethic. I mean, just the fact of you doing this amongst everything else that you do, working for Hudson, working for SABIAN, playing, touring all, schlepping your butt all over the country these days on weekends and weekdays and flights missed and bad weather, and I don't know. I say to people, I think there's more than one Joe Bergamini running around, for better or worse, for better or for worse.
Talk to my wife about that last part.
Your time management, I know there's probably a bunch of drum teachers that are watching this or will watch it, and I think it's a real testament to organizational skills, and time management was something I wanted to ask you about. But really, it's an incredible career that you've built doing what you do, and maybe it's something that we want to talk a little bit about is kind of career development for teachers themselves, and how and what do they counsel and sort of advise for their students. I think it's a topic that comes up when I meet with guys. A couple of weeks ago, being a new resident of New Jersey, having left New York, I got with a couple of drummers. I said, hey, let's have lunch, and just invite a few drummers. I knew a couple guys. I said to them, invite some of your friends if you think they may want to sit around and talk about lug nuts and tension casings,
Right.
and we just had a drum, kind of a drum talked about music, life, drumming, and whatever. But that question always does come up about them asking me questions kind of about my career, which, and I think everyone in this business, their career is there's no road, there's no path you take. Like if you want to be an accountant, you go to college, you get your accounting degree, if you go to grad school, whatever, and get your higher level degrees for accounting, and then you go work either for yourself as an accountant or in a firm, and there's a path, and
Right.
you have an idea, what you're going to be doing, every day for a long time, provided, you just keep doing it. And I think what we do as drummers, educators, teachers, clinicians, authors, I think because of the way of the world, you have to do a lot of different things to make a living doing it and piecing together all the parts. And you're the perfect example of that.
Well, thank you.
What you do now. And, for me, I mean, there was no great mystery or secret, or I didn't have any secret sauce, like making symbols or anything like that. I just kind of, put one foot in front of the other, and, along for many years with my business partner, Paul Siegel. And, we dove in, and I look back at some of the decisions that we made, and budgets that we had to approve, and the overages on budgets, and I kind of look back and say, wow, how did I ever have the nerve? How did I sleep at night, doing some of that stuff? Because we were spending, in some projects and some of the live events, really big, sums of money. And, the businesses were always, they were more than labors of love, but they weren't, we weren't working at Apple, where, they were printing money,
Right.
and I kind of look back and say, boy, how did we sleep at night? We, at one point we had a staff of, in the old DCI days, kind of at its peak in the late 80s, we probably had, 20 to 25 full and part-time people working, and for me, that was a lot, it was a
Yeah.
lot to oversee, and know that every, week we had there were people and their families that were relying on us for their paychecks, and you have to be able to get used to that, and kind of sleep at night, with that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's, what I do say to people is follow your instinct and your heart, and, do it the best you can do it. I tell my kids, when they were young, they're older now and they're all doing their thing. And thank God, they're doing good things. But I always told my kids, whatever it is, if it's making a donut, make the best donuts in the area. And you got to find that thing that inspires you to get out of bed every morning, because there's a lot of mornings in your lifetime, and you got to have the energy, and doing gigs, and you get home late at night. Now I gig Sunday night in on the border of Connecticut, New York, and then drove down to the shore 2 hours. I got in, in the wee hours. I was the only one on the highway practically. And you got to wake up the next morning and hit it, because there's a lot of things. I had a meeting in Philadelphia for a project I had to go to, and, get in the car and drive another 2 hours, the next
Yep.
morning.
Yep.
But, and
For
I'm
sure.
kind of rambling on here, but, it's really, I think, a blessing if you can find that thing that rings your bell in the morning. Like I said, there's an awful lot of mornings in a lifetime. For me, one of the things that I say, and we can change subject in a minute. I'm kind of rambling maybe, but one of the things that I do say to people is, finding that, what we do, it's really not, I've never viewed anything that I've done professionally as a job. It's never been about Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 for me ever. And as well as anyone, I might send you an email at 11, 12 o'clock at night, or you might send me an email at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, or from an airplane if there's Wi-Fi, or you're editing a book and you send me the chapter when you land and you have Wi-Fi service. I know for you it's the same thing, and I know for all the guys. I mean, I've talked extensively with Steve Smith about it, and just the guys that I've been fortunate enough to work with and really get to know, behind the curtain how they live.
Yeah.
And it's not about a job. Steve Smith, besides Journey, when he does his own thing, he books the flights, he books the hotels for vital information. He makes sure the van is going to be in London at the airport when they land, so they can get to, to Ronnie Scott's that night. And that blows my mind, beyond, because not only is he playing at a ridiculous level and practicing constantly and being a father and a husband and trying to enjoy his life, but he works like, to me, there's like three Steve Smiths. There's like a drummer, there's the educator, there's the tour manager. And it's amazing. And I know Steve well and know what I'm talking about, but it's never been about, oh, it's 6 o'clock, I can't work anymore. Look, we all have life things and we got to go places, or you have to be at your kid's birthday party on Saturday at noon, or coaching a little league game on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. And actually for me, I stopped playing drums for a while because I wanted to be a little league coach and share that time with my sons. And it was, some of the best memories of my life. But now they're older. I'm not coaching Little League anymore, and I'm playing drums again, which is also some of the best things going on in my life. And I've been fortunate to be able to blend those things. But it's always about, I get up, check emails. If it's Sunday morning, I'm posting things. If it's a promotion that we're running, I'm making sure, I'm hitting Facebook, and you just do the thing. I don't even think about it. It's like, oh, someone needs an answer. Someone's working on a project, they're editing, they're writing, you just do it, So anyway, a long-winded, I don't know, answer to something.
No, that's great. I know you have so much wisdom, and thank you for what you said regarding me. And actually, you touched on the place I wanted to start with this, which is everybody here, everybody watching. I was going through the attendees list as you were talking, Rob, and these are all dedicated musicians and teachers. Many of them are friends. And you touched on a thing. I want to spend a good amount of time on you and how you got to where you are, because I think we're all interested. Everybody watching this teaches and plays, and we all have to be entrepreneurs. We all have to juggle a lot of different things. And I think it's easy for people to understand that you have to be a good player and you have to know what you're talking about when it comes to teaching. But sometimes I think on the entrepreneurial side, musicians don't. Some people have the talent. Some people like to sweat the details. Some people don't. So let's go back and get a little history from you. So you started off, did you not, as many of us did, as just a guy who wanted to play drums and do it for a living, right?
Yeah, I started playing when I was, 10 years old. And, I went the path that a lot of people did, especially maybe back in those days. I got my snare drum and I had a teacher, and I would work on my rudiments on the drum or on a pad. And it wasn't that exciting for me. I did it, but I wanted to have a kit, so I'd save money and put $5 a week down on a drum, and then I'd get a drum, and I built a kit. I asked my parents for a cymbal for my birthday, and so I started playing drums when I was young. I just loved it, and I don't know why. No one in my family played. My father was in retail. He owned a local 5 and 10 store in a little town that we grew up in New York, Dobbs Ferry, New York. But I just started playing drums and loved it. Played through high school and, played in bands. I also love sports. So it was always a conflict for me. Do I join the baseball team or do I join this new band? And usually the bands won out. It's kind of funny thinking back, but yeah, I always opted for the music. But I played a lot of baseball and basketball.
Right.
I guess I knew college was important to go to. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to accomplish at college. So I got in a band and I played a lot. I went to the University of Florida in Gainesville. I was a Gator, and played a lot and was in a pretty, well-known band at the time that we in Gainesville.
Wait,
Um,
Rob, did you go to school for music, or did?
no, I didn't. I took some music programs for the first 2 years. The school had a really good jazz big band, and I was in the big band. I brought my drums down to school. My poor father had to drive a car down that was packed with stuff on the roof, like with rope, and it was like the Beverly Hillbillies coming to town. But yeah, I did not go for music. I ended up with a degree in economics because I always had a real good grasp of numbers. When I was young, I could add up like 3 or 4 digits of numbers in my head, which I think went back to my father's retail store. I was really at a real young age. I worked the cash register, the old-fashioned cash register,
Sure.
and I would try to beat the register. When I was the bagger at the register, I tried to beat whoever was punching in the numbers. I
Right.
tried to beat the register machine.
Right.
But so numbers came easy to me, and I always liked the business side of it, but I also loved the music side of it. And I didn't have the courage, and my parents supported me with music, but they didn't think that it was a good lifestyle and career, I guess. So I did get a degree in economics, an undergrad degree. And when I graduated Florida, I moved back home to Dobbs Ferry, New York, and I didn't know any musicians because I had been away for 4 years. So I thought, let me work at a music store, and this way I'll meet players because I didn't want to do anything with my economics degree. I wanted to play, and I was 20, whatever, early 20s. So I sent a letter from Florida a few months before I was moving back to New York to Sam Ash, and there was a store nearby where I lived in Westchester in White Plains, New York. And I got a response back, and they said, yeah, when you get home, call us, we'll set up a job interview. And I got hired by Sam Ash, and I worked in the drum department, got, real close with Jerry and Bernice Ash and Sammy and Richard Ash. In fact, Richard was a good guitar player. We did some gigs together.
Uh-huh.
And then Jerry at one point asked if I would consider working at the Manhattan store. He needed help in the drum department on 48th Street. And I thought, wow, be a great opportunity to meet city players. So it did work out, though. I started meeting some players in Westchester, and then I started meeting some guys in the city. And shortly after that, I had heard about some radio ads and some print ads like in Modern Drummer about this place called Drummers Collective. And I had no idea, exactly what it was. I knew it was some kind of educational something for drums. And I walked over there one lunchtime. It was a couple blocks from the Sam Ash where I was working on 48th, and um, I dug the place, and I started. I signed up. I started taking some lessons there. That was in 1979. And a couple months after, I was just doing, a lesson a week. I go there and practice at lunchtime a little bit. You know, there was, hang out there a little bit. There was a little bit of a scene going on. Um, I got friendly with the guy who was at the front desk, who was Paul Siegel, and
Oh, Paul
we
was working at the front desk at the time?
to pay. He had no money, so he to pay for his lessons. He would work, at the desk and answer phones and schedule lessons and take cancellations and
Right,
take
right.
and all that. So he worked the front desk, and one day, we went out for lunch, and Paul said, don't tell anybody, but Rick Kravitz, who was the original founder of the collective, he said he wanted to move back to Boston to his family's restaurant business. Apparently, he had a very big and successful business. And Rick, I guess, was a little tired of the scene in New York. It was really difficult, running a collective financially. And we sat down with Rick, and well, all of a sudden, we figured out a way to buy Drummers Collective from Rick. I was 25. I had no money. I borrowed a little bit of money from my folks, which I paid back with interest. Paul did the same. He borrowed a little bit of money. And basically, we just paid for the instruments that were there. And we paid Rick out over, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, a couple $100 a month kind of deal. And, one day I walked down a hallway of a building and with keys, and there's a business I own,
Wow.
without any preparation, known, kind of just jumped in. And
And so now you you just met Paul, and
yeah,
you get this now the
we had
gentleman.
lunch once, and now we were partners. I mean, literally, that's how well I knew him. We had lunch once, and I spoke to him a dozen times in the office.
Right. Now this is what I find fascinating. It's like this is where you as an entrepreneur and you're just you and Paul together. It was the seed was already there and it just came out. And also the guy who started the school. I'm sorry, I don't always remember his name.
His name is Rick Kravitz.
So when Rick, because he wanted to get out, it was also the timing of Rick wanting to get out, but also it sounds to me like he was wanting you guys to do it and patient with you rather than looking for the
Yeah.
most money and saying, I want all the money, I don't care. And so, right, that was a
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably not a lot of people that had eyes to own a small drum school in Manhattan. Really, you gotta be a little nuts, I think. But yeah, Rick wanted to see it continue, and he liked us. I mean, I was a little bit friendly with Rick. I got to know him even when I'd be hanging out there, and it was a very intimate, small place at the time. So I guess, you know, between him liking Paul and I don't know that he had a lot of other options, frankly. And rather than walk away from it, I guess he got some money out of it. It wasn't very much that we ended up, like I said, just paying the instruments off. But yeah, it was a real favorable circumstance. It wasn't like we came in and had big checkbook to write checks out of.
right. That's great. I can tell we're going to run out of time before we get anywhere close to what I was hoping to get to. So
Yeah.
now you own the collective.
Hmm.
How does DCI start? Because it wasn't too long after that, right?
Yeah. So what happened was, really shortly after taking over the school, one day I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was a guitar player that I was playing with, and he was talking about some friends of his. One guy that worked at was a cameraman at NBC TV, and talked about this new thing that was going to be coming, where one day soon in the near future, everybody would have a box in their living room hooked up to their TV that they could record a TV show on, or they could plug a camera into, and it was called the VCR. And there was VHS and beta tapes, two different sized tapes formats. And I didn't have one, and neither did Paul, but it just made so much sense that we were like off and running with this idea. I told Paul about it when I'd heard about it. So at the time, we were having small master classes, guys like Bernard Purdy and Lenny White, people that were passing through town. And we started thinking like, boy, be great to archive these things for our students. And then in the next breath, it was like, yeah, but a guy in St. Louis would want to see Bernard Purdy and Lenny White and Yogi Horton and, guys like that. And Ed Thigpen and then it was like, oh yeah, but what about guys in London, or what about guys in Paris, in Scotland, and it was like, wow, yeah, maybe this is a good idea we got here. So we contacted a couple of guys and set up some master classes, and the ones I just mentioned were the real early ones, Bernard and Lenny. They were, we knew them a little bit already from the school. So we didn't know anything about video. We didn't know anything about filming. We didn't know anything about lighting. We didn't know anything about editing. And we borrowed cameras and lights, we taped them to the ceiling. We burned like ceiling tiles, the soundproof ceiling tiles the first time we tried filming because the lights got so hot. We hadn't really thought about that part of it. But, we ended up with the Purdy video, putting it out, editing it. We took a little classified ad in Modern Drummer magazine, which had started, I think Ron started in '77, so it was in really early days of Modern Drummer. And it's Ron Spagnardi, who passed a long time ago, but was a terrific man and an industry hero and icon with what he did, obviously, with Modern Drummer. But we put a classified ad in, and lo and behold, like a couple of weeks after the magazine came out, we had like 2 or 3 checks in the mail. I was like, wow, this is really great. We were home sleeping, and some money came in for this thing. So we started producing, a few more, and I really felt strongly about going after a drummer that was in New York, that was working day and night, that you could never really see play because he was just recording, or else he'd be touring, and playing big venues for the most part. And that was Steve Gadd. And, I made it kind of my business, and wouldn't take no for an answer for a long time to convince Steve to do this. And it took time, it took phone calls, and it took a lot of persistence, shall we say, to make that happen.
Did you know Steve? Like, so you're like, okay, we should get Steve Gadd. At that point, you don't know him.
I didn't know him from Adam. I had gotten his phone number, and I don't remember if it was through there was a phone service that all the musicians in New York used called Radio Registry. And I may have left him a message, and maybe he called back, but I got his phone number, and I just, consistently called him. And, he was really, nice when we'd speak. This was, it went on for a while before we even met. And then finally, one day he said, yeah, okay, let's meet. And I met him at this little bar on the corner of 30th and 8th Avenue called the Molly Wee Pub, which is still in Manhattan. And this is in 1980. It's still there.
Wow.
It was like 5 o'clock. I went down there, and because it was a couple doors down from where Steve was living at the time. It was on 30th Street. And I'm waiting and waiting. I'm having, the soda, whatever, beer. And all of a sudden I see the door open and Steve comes walking in, and my heart is like beating out of my chest like that, because I'm meeting the guy that inspired me like, no one else musically, and still does, and is still, my musical hero. And, whatever you can say about a person and what they mean to you, on many levels. But we hit it off. He took me that day up to his apartment, showed me some drums. We hung out a little bit and just started a relationship. and he was, really busy. It took some time, and it's a story which I'll just do the real condensed version of because it wouldn't be complete. We were getting close to really pulling the trigger to do something, and one day I called Steve, and he just blew up on the phone for no reason. He said, "Forget it, it's off. Don't call me. We're finished." Boom, hangs up the phone. Click, dead. I'm sitting at my desk at the collective, like with my mouth, like, what just happened? I put all this effort in. I felt we had connected. I felt he trusted me, and I felt that we were, almost to the, finish line here of getting in the studio and filming. And all of a sudden, it's like I was crushed. So Paul and I, shared an office, and I looked at Paul. I said, "Man, I just don't know what just happened here, but this isn't good, and I'm sort of not going to let it go." I felt like at that moment, if it wasn't put back on track, like immediately, he would never answer the phone again, or he would never return a call. I'm not going to like stalk him at his apartment. I said, but I knew, and I forget how, but I knew at that night he was going to be recording at Ralph McDonald's studio, which was near the collective called Rosebud. And I used to go home at night with my wife. She worked at the Daily News, and we drive home together. I said to her, "Listen, I got to do something tonight." And I told her what happened. I said, "I'm going to go and just wait at the studio for Steve. I can't let this go. One, I'm not going to sleep. And two, I may never hear from him again. This has to happen. I can't live with this." So she went home, and I said to Paul, "I'm going to go wait on the street. I don't know what's going to happen, And I literally sat on the curb outside of the studio, which is on Broadway. It was like on Broadway and 40th Street, somewhere in the low, very close to the collective, but on Broadway.
Right.
And after about 2 hours, I'd say it was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, coming around the corner, I see Steve, and his wife Carol was behind him, and she saw me, and she just started shaking her head, like holding her head, like, "Oh no, this is not going to be good." Like, and I'm thinking, like, what's this? Is like this guy that I've, love is going to slug me? Like, what's it? And he comes up to me, and he's quite a bit shorter than me. He got right in my face, and he said, "What are you doing here? Like, what do you want?" And he was really aggressive and really, jammed up. And I said, "Listen," I mustered up like all my strength. I said, "Listen, I'm not letting you, hang up the phone, walk away from this project. We're so close to getting this done. It's going to be a great thing for you. It's going to be really important for people, drummers all over the world. And we got to talk. Whatever is the problem, tell me what's the problem." And I didn't back down. And he looked at me. He said, "All right, well, come upstairs with me." And he took me in the studio, and like my heart, I was like shaking, And I remember walking in, and it was, Marcus Miller and Richard T. and I think David Sanborn, Ralph McDonald. It was like the absolute A+ team of teams, It was like the all-stars of New York at this session. But my mind was so wild. I wish I remembered more of the music, because I'm sure it was, could have been like a Bill Withers record, just
Right.
the two, which Ralph produced. I mean, it was something, serious, musically. But that was the turning point. After that, Steve respected me. It was just a bad day. He was probably exhausted. The guy literally would work around the clock. He'd do 2 or 3 records, in the day, and then in the morning he'd do some jingles. And he had drum sets that were kind of piggybacking around Manhattan. He would just get to the studio, record. The next set was going to the next studio. And he was an absolute, and probably still is, an absolute workaholic.
But just so he wasn't worried about. Correct me if I'm wrong. He wasn't worried about. You hadn't upset him with the business. He just felt overwhelmed, and he wanted to get away from it, and you had to kind of talk him back.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to put it. He was just, busy, tired, and just, it was just a bad day, and I
Right.
happened to call at a bad time.
I just want to say, having worked with you as long as I have now, from not only did you say, look, I got it, I have to make this happen. I can't let it walk away. But at that moment, then you had to, again, engage a skill that you probably never trained for, probably never expected you'd have to do, that I think we both have learned, is to try to basically, it's almost like I don't know if you want to call it, he's not your friend then like he is now. Artist relations, human resources, managing people, managing a conflict, getting him comfortable again, which I know now that you're great at. Um, you know, I've tried to learn this skill myself, but when you're presented with something that's conflict and it's business related, you might be all jammed up inside and you might have your blood pressure, blood boiling, but you can't, let your emotions get the best of you when you're trying to solve those problems. It just leads to more, you know, it can lead to things blowing up even worse. So
Yeah.
you kind of instinctively knew that, and then you made Up Close was the product of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Then things, I mean, it was no looking back after that. I guess, and maybe he appreciated the effort and the extent that I went to, and he saw how much I wanted to do it. Maybe that also impressed him. We never really talked about it. It's funny. I'd like to talk. I'll have to ask him about it next time we see. We never
um,
really talked about that night. Um, Again, that I can remember.
right. So Rob, I'm just watching how fast time is going by.
I know.
Um,
I
so,
know.
so DCI, I could ask you so much about it, but I think most people do know the well-known, not just the drummers, but the other famous musicians that you worked with. But I do because everybody watching knows Hudson music so well. I do want you to fast forward just so we don't run out of time on this.
Yeah.
Talk about how you started Hudson Music, because at that point you did not own a publisher anymore. You were working for Warner Brothers, right? So what happened at that point that made you start Hudson?
So what happened was Paul and I started working with Sandy Feldstein, who was at Alfred Music at the time. And I didn't know Sandy, but we met, maybe at a PAS show or a NAMM show, and we hit it off. He was, a wonderful man, and a real mentor to many, many people in the business. And
I just have to interrupt and say it's so great. Anybody who's paying attention from last week when we had Dave Black on,
yeah, right.
Sandy was Dave's mentor, and so everyone
Right.
remembers
Yeah.
Sandy. We all remember him so fondly. Such an important and great guy.
Great guy and a brilliant, good player, but a brilliant, he was just brilliant at putting books together, and also taught me a lot about work ethic. He would be running a big company and go home at night and edit drum books. It was like he'd be editing on planes. I saw it with my own eyes. He loved it. He loved to edit books and be creative and create product.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe one reason why he and I hit it off so well, because I love creating product like that too, and thinking outside the box, and you know anyway. So I know I'm yapping away here, but what happened was Paul and I, we had the idea to start doing books. We were just doing videos, which VHS and beta video at the time, and we said, we should be doing some drum books. Why don't we try something really different? Ted Reed was number one, and Stick Control, and the same books, Carmine's, Realistic Rock, the same sort of top five books now with the same five books then. So we had an idea using some of the teachers and some of the resources at Drummers Collective to put some books together. And the first one, which took us like 2 years to do because we'd never put a book together and the author never wrote a book, was the Frankie Malabé Afro-Cuban Rhythms for Drum Set book. And it was a killer to do, in many levels. We fell into every, pothole, made every mistake, but it came out, incredible when we released it. And it really, blew people's minds because Frankie was developing things that were never done on drums. he took conga rhythms and bell parts and figured out ways of putting them on the drum set. And we put maps in the book, and people were like, "What do you mean you have a map in a drum book?" Well, we had to show that the rhythm came from Puerto Rico, and it came through Cuba, and then it went through New Orleans, and it came up this way and that way, And we would that one.
Never far from my hand in my drum
That's
room.
the one. So we tried to think out of the kind of outside the box on it, and it was well received. And then we did a few more. We did one on Brazilian rhythms with the Duca de Fonseca. Bob Weiner was kind of a co-author on those books. And we all of a sudden we started doing these books, and Sandy helped guide us, gave us some incredible, looking back, financial support on a handshake, a really respectable amount of money to produce. And we started using his company, which at the time was CPP. He left Alfred, became president of CPP Bellson. We signed a distribution agreement with CPP for the books. And then, Warner Brothers shortly thereafter purchased CPP Bellson, and Paul and I, we had sold the company. I skipped a few steps. We had sold DCI Music Video and our publishing company, which was called Manhattan Music Publications.
Right.
We sold that to Sandy, who was there at the real beginning and gave us the startup money to start producing books. Shortly after the sale, Sandy calls one night and said, I got to tell you, my phone's blowing up. I got to tell you that we just closed a deal. You now work for Warner Brothers. And I'm like, what? He says, yeah, you're going to get an ID card. You get like a free pass into like the Warner, theme parks and a discount on clothing. What are you talking about? He said, yeah. He said, I'm now president of a division of Warner's. And he was in Miami. Paul and I were still working in New York. We had a production office in New York, and all the salespeople moved down to Florida. And I found myself, I was, running with Paul a division for Warner Brothers that was doing, instructional stuff. And, we went like the wind because we now had big resources financially to produce. And, one of the big projects we did was a real beginner series on guitar, piano, bass, drums, and vocals. We produced about 40 titles. And I mean, it was crazy. We had shoots going on all over the country. And that series, is called the Getting Started On, series.
Yeah.
They did really well.
Uh-huh.
But, and then Sandy wanted, other products. So, one of the first ones was the Chad Smith video that we did under DCI.
Right.
B.B. King. There was a quite a, massive catalog that we did because we suddenly had funds to be able to, really roll this thing out and, be working on multiple projects, at once.
Right. That's great. And so now you're at that stage, and how does Hudson start?
So Paul and I had 5-year employment contracts. Everything was really going great. Sandy was a fantastic boss. He was in Miami, North Miami. We were in New York. He'd say, come down when you want to talk. He'd see us in the winter, never in the summer. And one day Sandy got pushed out of Warner's. They brought in an accountant who had no idea of anything for music, and the entire environment just changed, on a dime, and it was no longer fun, for me. It was just a completely, different job. So our contract, it was, running out. And the contracts expired. They wanted us to close the office in New York, move down to Miami, and I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to be a corporate guy like that had become. So we said, both of us, Paul and I, both said we're not going to renew. We had a 1-year non-compete clause in the agreement, so we couldn't produce product for that 1 year, except we did a few titles for them so that we had some money coming in. And after the 1-year non-compete was over, we started Hudson Music, and
Nice.
we just sort of picked up where things had left off at that point.
And when you started Hudson, when you were going through that process, and you knew you didn't want to re-sign, but did you reach out? Were there certain artists in the beginning that you knew that you were going to bring into the Hudson fold that you reached out to? And
Yeah, yeah, there were a couple of guys, early on, I really always wanted to work with Victor Wooten, so Victor, we were involved with Victor. Mike Portnoy was an early Hudson Music title. Another project with Neil, which had taken some time, but we knew we wanted to do more with Neil Peart, that is.
And also, wasn't History of the US Beat with Steve?
Yeah. Yes, we had worked with Steve on his first instructional for DCI. I think that was in '87. And, Steve being Steve was developing all kinds of, incredible, content, so to speak. So yeah, that's an amazing project. Those two discs really are special.
I'm also Dom is with us watching over us, and I want to thank Dom for reminding me to mention everybody should watch your interview on the sessions.
Oh yeah,
because there's tons of great stuff, a lot of stuff more detailed what we talked about here and what we will talk about. And Dom's interviewed so many great people on the sessions, and
great series.
Absolutely, it's just unbelievable all the people he's covered. I'm telling so many musician friends about it, not just drummers. There's so much in there, and as a matter of fact, I do want to segue again. I do want to make sure I talk about what we're doing with Hudson now.
Yeah.
And one of the things, because it's gotten a little more challenging with the educational books, is we did get into doing something that I'm excited about, and I know you've done before and you're excited about, which is a real biography with Bobby Morris.
Yeah, yeah. The way that came about was Steve Smith had mentioned to me that Bobby was looking for, was it Steve or Daniel Glass? Got to find that out for the record. One of the two of those very fine gentlemen mentioned to me that Bobby Morris, who I didn't know a lot about other than the fact that he played with Louie Prima and was a Vegas guy, quote, Vegas guy. They said he has this, really interesting biography. And I, connected with Bobby, sent it to me. I started reading this thing, and it just, blew my mind that, one person could have the life basically that he had, the amount of people that he interacted with, the variety of people that he interacted with, from presidents to mobsters to, the absolute top, showbiz artists, and became a booking agent in Vegas, the largest booking agent. I read this thing and said, this has to come out. This isn't the Hudson Music wheelhouse, but it's got to come out. And right. I got you involved. You did a fantastic job editing, incredible job. And I want to give a big shout out to Mike Hoff, who's the other important, wheel in this dune buggy that goes down the road. Mike does amazing work and has an incredible, I feel very fortunate, an incredible skill set of between tech and design and being a drummer and just being a real good and real smart guy. He's been instrumental in everything I've been working on for the past, I don't know, I want to say 12 years, maybe. I don't kind of think about those things, and makes me feel old. But
and you turn around and a decade's gone by, like we've been working.
There's another 10 gone by. But Mike has done fantastic work. He was very instrumental, in Drum Guru, as were you, as was Steve Smith, and like you said, Chad Smith, Mike Portnoy. I mean, those guys were great in the beginning, helping launch that. But yeah, the Bobby Morris book will be out. It's actually at the printers. I just hung up with him right before we jumped on this call. He's excited. He was wondering. He called and wondered, when we're going to have copies. And it should be about a month from now.
That's
It's
great.
literally at the printers. So
I
that's
want to.
a hardcover book coming out, and we're now working on another one that'll be out hopefully in the fall, a biography on Buddy Rich.
Mhm.
And I was just with a Buddy Rich collector yesterday named Charlie Braun, who has 2 rooms in his house devoted to Buddy. It's just mind-boggling what he has. Every record, every cassette, he has walls of magazines and posters and drums and music stands that were Buddy. He has a paper mat that was folded up. I opened it up. It said Buddy Rich stood here. It was like a hotel bath mat that was paper. That
Oh
somebody.
God.
He has. It's incredible. Matchbooks from Buddy's Place, the old club in New York that Buddy had. I mean, unbelievable. So we're using a lot of things that Charlie has in the book. They'll be both online and in the book itself. So I spent a day going through that yesterday. That'll be out hopefully in the fall.
I'm working on that one now, as you know,
Yeah.
and it's a great book. I've read a couple of Buddy biographies, as have you, and it'll be a nice addition. It's a little bit different. It's kind of like JFK. I've read 5 JFK biographies. You can always get something new out of a.
Yeah.
Rob, we're going to go a little bit over time, but there's 2 things I want to ask you that I asked.
Sorry for yakking away.
No, it's good. There's 2 things I want to ask you about Dave Black that I know everyone listening is going to be interested in. So Drum Guru, maybe we'll come back to that. We haven't. So it's an app. And with Hudson, I think we have the best digital bookstore. The digital books are amazing. So here's the 2 questions. Let me get them out so you can think about both and answer both. One is, what do you look for anymore in a book? Because there's so much out. What do we look for in a product? And how do you see physical and digital? Do you see them coexisting going forward, or do you see one taking over, or how do you see the future panning out?
Good questions. First question, what we look for is something that's different. I would say that's sort of the bright blinking light is for teachers or students or authors in general to think about is coming up with something different. We don't need another stick control book, but if you have a really interesting variation on stick control or a certain way to apply some of the concepts in stick control, it could be worthy of a book. And I think that test driving it is an important thing. Letting your students check out the material. And I do think that a lot of the books that we take on are outgrowths of guys teaching and compiling things that they're working on with their students into a book. And I think that's a great way to naturally let content and concepts evolve, is working on them with your students and, spending time and doing your homework and thinking about something different. And I think that's the number one area.
Okay.
The days of, there was a long period of time where we would kind of really focus on the name. Who was was it a well-named drummer? Because it was a lot easier to market, marketing a Steve Smith book is easier than marketing a,
lesser known person.
Lesser known, person than, and it was an important consideration. We always think about, well, how are you going to market this and who are you going to sell it to and what level is it at? Is it a beginner book, which is the broader base of the pyramid? Is it super advanced, which is going to be the top of the pyramid and a much smaller audience? So those are the kind of secondary things that go into it. But first is the content has to be strong and really hold water.
Right.
The second question, what was your second one?
So the second question is, I really think for those who haven't checked out our digital bookstore, it's very strong.
Right.
Um, how do you feel about the future as far as the balance between physical and digital? Is physical going away completely in your eyes? Are they both existing? And where do you think that's going?
Um, One, I think that our digital book system is a value added system in that it if the book has any kind of additional media like an audio, play along track or or a video clip, it's right it presents itself right on the page. So if you have your iPad open and you're reading down, the book, and there's an icon that says video, you tap it, the screen pops up right there, and you watch the video, and then you tap it again, and it goes away, and you continue, reading either the music or the text. So there's no fumbling around. You don't have to go online. You don't have to look for a CD or a DVD and be, kind of multitasking. It's right there. You put it on your music stand. You tap the example if it's a play along track that goes along with the educational text or the music example, and it's great. I really do think that digital is ultimately going to win out because it is better. If the product is put together well and is enhanced with multimedia, I think that you can't compare a physical book to a digital book. That's on my philosophical level. I think that people hold on to the physical books for various reasons. And I think, some guys are definitely intimidated. They think, oh, technology, like, I'm not a whiz. I've been teaching for 30 years out of these books. Some people, don't want to change, which I get.
Mhm.
But we are definitely seeing traction with our digital books. And as you know, um, Hudson has been aggressively licensing product. We probably have a new book coming out every week so far for the next 2.5 months. I mean,
Mhm.
I think we're about 10 books, sort of backed up. I don't want to release more than one a week.
Right.
Even that's a lot and very difficult to market. But there's so much good content that's coming up, which is really wonderful. Guys are really being creative and writing some really good things. So there's a pipeline, and
Yep.
I don't know that physical will ever go away. It may, I don't know if it's the right analogy, Netflix versus, watching, regular TV with channel, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, or Netflix. I think they have different purposes to some degree,
Mhm.
but I do think that physical, I should say, I do think that digital is a superior format when you have multimedia involved.
Right. A couple of Jeremy Steinkohler, who's one of our authors of this book, Finding the Groove, as a great example. He's a terrific book. He came to us with it. We did it digitally, and so if somebody has a good idea, right now it's actually exciting. It's easier to get published right now because you
Yeah.
can do it digitally. And if you can come in and you have a great idea and it looks great, and the thing is, we can, even if it doesn't look great, but if the content is great, we can give you the right advice to get it to where it looks good enough. We can help you with that, right? But
Absolutely.
it's easier
Yeah,
to get published.
it's all like I said before, it's all about the content, really it's a, you know, I don't know what content is king. I mean, everyone uses it, but it's the truth, and
Yeah.
it is the bottom line. Um,
And I
and
think,
I just want to say what you just said, Joe, is really important for probably a lot of the guys that are going to see this because of the costs involved in a physical book. There's printing and inventorying and shipping around the world. You have to build in, or you have to, as a publisher, feel confident you're going to be able to sell X amount of books to make it worthwhile, because you're investing a lot of money in the inventory and all those, the creation of the book. Whereas digital, obviously it's a beautiful thing because you don't have inventory. You can sell a book in Russia, in China, in Canada, and not have to ship a thing. And
Right. Right.
it costs $12. I think it's $12 or $13 to ship one drum book into Canada.
Right.
So in addition to the book, you have it becomes expensive.
Mhm.
So
And,
anyway,
another thing that Hudson is great at, I've tried to learn from, is that if you have that and you have the digital link, you can share that and you're on your own with your social media. One of our wisdom authors, our good friend John Favicchia, is also watching. John's Elements book.
Johnny
John,
Faz.
John's been really good at using his social media to consistently, gently make sure people are aware that the book is out there. And if
Absolutely.
you have a digital book out, it's as easy as taking that link now in your social streams, whether it's your YouTube channel, your Facebook, Instagram, and so like the author has a lot of power to help us promote their title.
There's absolutely no one to better, quote, sell a book than the author, because he knows why he wrote it. He's the most familiar with the content, and he's, going to be most passionate. And like I said way in the beginning, you don't take no for an answer. The author has, an incentive on many levels to really work that book. Whereas the publisher, like I said, we're releasing a new book a week. So there's only so much attention we can give. And we try to constantly, go back and rotate and make people aware of things. But yeah, it's very easy for the author nowadays. It's one of the blessings of the internet. There's been the internet has taketh away, but in some ways it's giveth. And
uh,
that's one of the good things it's done is helping promote, inexpensively.
it's leveled the playing field a little. Great question here, Rob. Just let's clarify. Kevin Stevens, great drummer and teacher from LA at MI. Kevin wants to know, do we have a feature where we can write notes in the digital books if you're teaching from it?
That's a great suggestion. We don't at the moment, but we'll give that one to Mike Hoff to work on. He's the man, if it can be done. That's a great suggestion. Or there may be some way of attaching an external, note, like on your laptop or on your phone, you have your notepad. There may be a
Right.
way of attaching that to the book. So yeah, thank you for that suggestion. We'll pursue that. That's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea. I still like to date the page, when the
Yeah.
student comes in. So, all right, let's go. Rob, if you can give me 10 more minutes, if you don't have to run.
I'm good. I just sorry that we're going over like this.
I never do this, but I had this little thing that I mentioned to you last night. But you only have 15 seconds per name. A lot of people don't know some of the people the level and the people that you've worked with. Some of them do, but let me just say a name.
All right,
And
this is unrehearsed, folks. This is unrehearsed.
I'm going to say a name. You tell me why they're important to you.
Okay.
Okay. And that means if personally, but also what you did work-wise with them. But you only have 15 seconds per person.
Okay.
Ready? Here comes. Jaco Pastorius.
Oof. I'm speechless on that one. Jaco single-handedly changed the instrument. There are few of those that I've gotten to work with, like Giovanni Hidalgo on conga. I think Steve Gadd was obviously a game changer, changed the way guys played, the way they sounded on recording. I'm jumping around. But Jaco was just a brilliant musician that I was close to and missed terribly, and only wonder what he would have done musically had he not left us so soon.
Hmm. Phil Collins.
Uh, Great, lovely man. I love his playing. I love his singing. I love his writing. He's an absolute all-around complete package and talent, and just a lovely guy. And really fortunate that I was able to work with him.
And that was on a buddy concert,
I was
right?
on a buddy concert. Yeah, Paul and I, he got married shortly after we worked with him. We sent him a really nice bottle of champagne to his wedding. It was in, I think it was in Switzerland. He was living at the time, and he wrote back a lovely note, which I kept. It's a prized possession,
Oh,
thanking
nice.
us for sending him the bottle of champagne. That's the kind of guy he is.
David Garibaldi.
Uh, One of my oldest, sort of drum friends. Also, just nothing but what can you say? He another game changer. You hear him on a record and you say, "Oh, there he is," DG. An incredibly sweet man, very hard worker. As he coins it, he's on the million gig march.
And you've done uh,
A bunch of projects, quite
yeah,
a few. Yeah, books, video, drum guru stuff. Yeah, David is just as salt of the earth. Also hardworking, still practices. Every time we come out with a new product, he calls me, "Hey, you didn't send it to me. I need some new stuff." Always looking for new ideas. That's
right.
David Garibaldi.
And thank God he's okay and he's still with
Yeah.
us.
Oh my God. That was
Um, Louie Bellson.
ah. Um. I miss him. I get choked up thinking about Louie.
Hmm,
An
great
incredible
man,
guy.
great man, great player. And you were on the Buddy Rich tribute concerts, you were able to
I just
document.
saw these pictures that Carlos that they're working on these photos that I posted one. I was very close with Louis. He called regularly. My family knew him, and he was an innovator. I mean, he played with not only two bass drums. There was a thing that he did once. I have a picture with three bass drums.
Mhm.
He was so far ahead of his time and such an innovator and such. I mean, when you use the word prince of a man,
Mhm.
there's Louis Bellson, and then there's sort of the rest of the world.
Right.
That's Louis. Hard to describe if you didn't have a chance to experience him in person. What somebody's spirit and vibe and heart was like. I mean, really, really unbelievable.
I'll just say, add quickly that thankfully I was able to experience him in person, and I can vouch for him. He's just
A one of a kind.
one of a kind. Um, a couple of people important to Hudson music. Tommy Igoe.
Tommy is a force in many levels and great drummer. One of the most devoted, passionate people I know about education and the importance he places on education and on quality of education. He has a very high bar and he tries to meet it for himself and he makes everyone that he works with, try to meet that bar too. And if you don't, watch out. But
Jojo Mayer.
he's done great. Jojo, another one, very high bar, brilliant guy. Um, he's one of these guys that is extremely intelligent and sits and thinks deeply, does the research. For the hand video that he did and the foot video, he spoke to all the greats, and really did his homework on those projects. He talked like, on for the hand video, he consulted everyone at that time, Joe Morello and Dom and John Riley and Danny Gottlieb, all the guys that are the real hand guys. And he did the same with the bass drum video. An incredibly hard worker, another guy who'll fly around the world and just, he's constantly working and developing.
In all the years we've been doing this together, I've discovered how hard it is to create a product in the drum education world that will sell a lot. And both Tommy Igoe and Jojo Mayer did that.
Yeah,
Groove Essentials and Secret Weapons. I mean,
yeah,
they hit it. They hit it,
yeah. They did. They hit it out of the park.
Chick Corea.
Ah, what an incredible period of time that was. It was during the Electric Band era, and the first project we ever did with Dave Weckl was a book with a play along cassette called The Contemporary Drummer Plus One.
Yep.
And it was a great project that Dave put together. And we had the concept to make it was a crazy idea to have it come in this custom plastic case that fit the charts in one spot and the book in the other and the cassette. And, we actually had a mold made and went to a plastics manufacturer to make a case to hold this thing. And everyone thought we were out of our minds. And we couldn't make them in the beginning. We couldn't make them fast enough. They sold like crazy. And in the real beginning, I sent one to Steve Smith, and he calls up, like a week later. He says, "Are you kidding me? I can't play any of this stuff." I said, "Steve, I don't know, man. We're selling them like crazy." He said, "Who could play it?" But working with Dave led to meeting Chick and Chick's manager at the time, who we became very close with, Ron Moss, and we ended up doing projects with the entire Electric Band. Patitucci, Garibaldi, Eric Marienthal, and Chick and Dave, and it was a wonderful period of time. We were filming a lot of them out in Chick's studio, Mad Hatter, in L.A. And it was just a great, great memories and a great period of time. And Chick is such a pro and such a sweetheart of a guy. We spent a lot of time together, during that period.
Yeah. Just a couple more. We're winding it down.
Sure.
The next name is a guy, everyone's going to be shocked at this one, but this just goes to show how wide Rob Wallis's net is cast in the world. Bernie Williams.
Oh, man. Bernie was my son's favorite baseball player, and every morning during baseball season, we would discuss what Bernie did the day before in his game. And somehow life just ran a crazy course. After Bernie retired from baseball, he always played guitar, but he got very serious about it. He went to Manhattan School of Music, studied with a 4-year degree, kept his head down. He didn't go there as Bernie Williams. He went there as a guitar student and did the work. And Bernie lived near me in Westchester and would frequent the jams. And he played a lot with guys that I was playing with. And I got to know him more and more over the years. And we've had some really interesting musical moments. Some crazy situation. Just 1 minute, a friend of mine was at the Jersey Shore. He said he was going up to Mike Francesa from The Fan, which, if you're not in New York, he's probably got the biggest sports radio show in New York. And at the end of every summer, he would go to a club in New Jersey. They'd have music, and then they would have Mike would broadcast from the club. And this one year, it was going to be Bernie sitting in with a band. So a friend of mine was going that day, and I didn't even know about it. I was actually on my ride in my car on my way down to the Jersey Shore, and he said, "I've got this extra pass. Bernie Williams, right? He's going to be sitting in with the band." So he said, "I'll meet you. Come." I said, "Okay, let's see if traffic. If I get there in time." Sure enough, I got there. Got in. Somehow Bernie was playing on the stage. We just happened to connect eyes. He kind of called me backstage during a break. And the next thing I know, he introduced me to the band. And within 5 minutes later, I'm there in like my cutoff and like flip flops. The guy says, "Hey, you want to sit in?" And it was a Springsteen cover band, actually. And I knew the catalog well, so I ended up playing, and it was broadcast live on the radio. Like, it was nuts. I was in my car in the Jersey Turnpike, and 10 minutes later, I'm playing, a Springsteen tune, on The Fan with Bernie. So
Yeah.
that was an interesting one.
I wanted everybody to get a little sense of, your other side of Jersey and Springsteen and Bernie, and you got a whole nother thing. That's a time. We're down to 3 people.
Okay.
We covered him a little bit before, but I want to say him again because he's important to you and to both of us and to Hudson. Steve Smith.
One of my closest friends, an inspiration, somebody that never takes the status quo. I've told the story where years ago we were working on something and he had been touring in Europe for 3 weeks. He got home and I knew exactly when he was getting home. I said, well, I'll call him, in the next morning. We were in the middle of something. I really needed something answered. And I called and spoke to his wife, Diane. And I said, I'm really sorry. I know Steve just got home last night, but I got to talk to him for a couple of minutes. Whatever it was, we had to, get some things answered. She said, oh, Rob, I'm really sorry. He's downstairs practicing. Are you kidding me? He's been away for 3 weeks, hasn't even opened up his mail yet, and he's downstairs. He's not even home 12 hours, and he's practicing. She said, yeah, he had some things he had to work on, That's Steve Smith. Just a genuine guy, sincere, and an inspiration. And he's always been the same. I've known him since the mid 80s, and he's just a pleasure to work with, have lunch or dinner with, and we talk regularly. And most of the time we talk about our lives and our families more than anything else. But Steve's just a remarkable person.
One of my favorite people that I've met through you and through Hudson Music, and one of my favorite people to work on, Pathways of Motion and Drum Legacy, the things I've gotten to work with him on, I just love it when someone is one of my favorite drummers, and then I start to admire their intelligence and admire them as a person as well. And and he's certainly that. Neil Peart.
I knew you were going to hit me with that one.
Keep it short, though. Keep it short.
We could do a whole hour, obviously, on Neil, and maybe we can touch, because the story for the way that all came about, it was special. In a nutshell, back in the day before email, even Neil was known for writing letters with a pen and paper, and that's how he communicated with Lenny at Zildjian. He would be getting ready for a tour and he'd send a letter about the cymbals he needed. They didn't speak on the phone very often. So Paul and I would take turns writing letters to Neil, trying to encourage him, sort of like what I went through with Gadd. It was reminiscent a little bit. And we just kept writing to Neil. A month would go by, he'd write us back. And then a few months would go by, we would write him back. And this was like a West Coast, East Coast, tennis match. And one day, a letter comes in and said, it said, you wore me down, let's do this thing finally. And that was the first project that was up in, we did up in Woodstock, for DCI. Neil's, it took a long time, but Paul and I both became, really part of, a small inner circle. I was very touched once reading an interview where Neil referred to Paul and I almost in the same breath as his partnership with Alex and Geddy, and it pretty much blew my mind. But he viewed us as partners, and I was stunned when I read that in an interview. But an incredibly sweet man, like Joe has gotten to know him, and I'm thrilled that we were able to bring Joe into that fold. And for Joe, because I know how much that relationship has meant to Joe and how much he looked up to Neil, it's just rewarding to have seen their relationship develop and really grow. And the work we did, I think, is special and will always be special. I mean, the memories of being in Death Valley. I mean, in Woodstock with Neil trekking through the snow in snow boots and in snowshoes, I should say. He's a really, really interesting man. Private, keeps his circle small, but once you're in that circle, you're in it. And I just have only the best and nicest things to say about Neil. Just a lovely man who's endured some very, very difficult times. I met his daughter shortly before she was killed in a car accident, and he's bounced back, but he's had some very, very, very tough times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
but an inspiration for sure.
For sure. And probably a lot of the people watching it know my story. And in my sessions interview, I talked about it, so I won't go into it. Um, but publicly, I always have to thank you, and I can't thank you enough for,
Uh,
making the guy who was my hero, the reason I became a drummer and who I never thought in a million years I'd get to know or even meet to become somebody that I don't not only work with, but became friends with. So
yeah, I
thank
know.
you again.
You should come by now.
Yeah, it's funny how life works out sometimes,
You never know.
Well,
I tell my kids all the time, like for me, I was just a drummer, and I look back and think about these experiences and these situations. I really sometimes and I guess because I'm getting older now, looking back, I can't believe like, Bernie Williams. Like how did that happen? I'm
yeah,
playing. I text with him now. It's like I used to watch him night after night for years playing baseball. And all these guys that you've mentioned, it's just, I was just a drummer in Dobbs Ferry, New York, a little tiny town, and if I could do it, anybody could do it, and I mean that sincerely. There's no magic, there's no secret sauce. It was just one step at a time, and I tell my kids all the time, you never know who you're going to cross paths with in the course of a day.
hmm
You never know who
absolutely.
you call or.
But I did have one last name before we wrap
Or
up, and that's where bringing it back to where we all started, and that's Steve Gadd.
my hero.
Hmm. Rob, this has been just amazing, man. You've done so much for so many people. Uh, you changed my life. You changed actually the lives of all these drummers who watch these great things. And I'm just, thinking about all these amazing legends that you've not only met, but you've got them to open up and share everything they do with all of us. And you're, we thank you for it. And
No, I
I
couldn't,
think,
none of this could be, possible without the support of, really the musicians community and especially the drummers world all these years. And, people like you, Joe, and Mike, people like Dom that do what they do. And it just, I mean, there's a list. I wish we had time, that I could
yeah,
thank, the amount of people I'd like to thank, but none of it would really be possible without this world that we live in, this incredible fraternity. And I talk about it all the time. There's nothing like the drum fraternity. I've worked with a lot of different instrument, groups, so to speak, guitar players, bass players, horn players. It is nothing like drummers. And it's always a good hang when you're with drummers. You're always in good hands, and that's
absolutely.
really what made this possible. So
Well,
thank you.
Rob, oh,
You.
thank you so much. And, you know, Hudson Music is, I knew from a long time before I was involved with Hudson Music. I think everybody watching this can easily see that we do this because we love it. I mean, it's not even a job. It's a job, but it's not a job. And it's what you've done your whole life, Rob. It's what I've been fortunate enough to have guys like you and Dom to follow in your footsteps. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing your time with us today and sharing all of your wonderful work with the drummers over all the years. And we look for, you're getting older, but we still got a lot of work to do. So
Yeah, I'm
don't
not
hang in
done
there.
yet. I'm not done yet, but thank you. I want to thank all the teachers and drummers and everyone that supports this. And my phone is blowing up again.
There were,
Um, I
I kept you
thank
here
you, Joe.
the longest SEN webinar we've ever done. But
Oh, geez. All right. Sorry about that. I was like definitely yapping away, but thank you. And thanks everybody for watching and good luck out there.
Rob, you're the best. Thank you, and thanks everybody for watching. And hopefully, I'll see some of you guys in Philly on Friday, and maybe we'll have to drag Rob back in here to talk more about the biz at a later date.
Yeah, we'll do it again. All right. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.